Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, July the 8th, and we are starting one more live stream. If you're here with us, either on Instagram or YouTube, I'm gonna ask you for a favor. Just type and let me know you can see me and you can hear me. So I know everything is working as it should. Instagram seems to be working just fine. On YouTube, I'm still waiting to see the YouTube window showing up here on my browser. Let me refresh to see if we have anything live on YouTube. Yes, it looks like we are live on YouTube. And no chats so far. I can see our image, but no chats on YouTube. So if you're here with us, Aaron, thank you, Aaron. Aaron just confirmed. Aaron can see us and can hear us. Now, I don't see anything on Instagram, but it looks like we are working just fine. And as usual, let's take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on in Brazil. And you should be able to see my screen. And I'm taking a look at Estadão. Estadão is a major Brazilian newspaper. And the main heading is about President Donald Trump. I'm going to try to translate with lots of drama. President Donald Trump is doing what he likes the most at NATO to become the center of attentions. Okay, so that's the headline, and it's talking about the NATO meetings in Europe. Very interesting. In Brazil, we don't say NATO, we say OTAN, naturally, right? Like we typically do. Like the acronym in a different way. So instead of NATO, we say OTAN. But that's a major headline. And what I like about this newspaper is that it's not typically one-sided, like nowadays in the United States, like, both newspapers and TV news, they're typically just one-sided, right? Like you're gonna have like Fox News, which is 100% to the right, and then you have MSNBC, which is 100% to the left, right? And the Estadão, like they are a little bit to the right, but they try to be reasonably balanced. And very often they are going to say bad things, about President Donald Trump, but they also say bad things about President Lula. And they also going to say good things when they think it's warranted. They're going to say good things about, what President Donald Trump is doing, what President Lula is doing. So, it's somewhat refreshing to see a news channel that is not just one-sided, and that's why I like Estadão, like for our live stream, because they are going to bring different takes on different politicians, on different facts, and that's refreshing in my opinion. Now, this is a subject we spoke about last live stream, and interesting enough, it was Aaron who brought this, issue to our live stream. Like we have, a huge social problem caused by the bets, right? Bets in Brazil means like those websites in which people can bet money on sports, on, predictions. And this thing is, destroying the wellness of many people in Brazil, many families. So it's a major social problem we have. I don't know if it is because of our culture, and they are entangling this thing with soccer, which is a major social passion in Brazil, and but this thing is like destroying so many lives, right? And to a point in which the government, the federal government, is now trying to find a way out or how to regulate the bats, and it is very challenging because prior to the regulation, actually the bats, they were basically illegal, and they were already moving billions of dollars in Brazil even prior to the regulation. And then what the federal government did was, listen, since the bats are a reality, right? It's not like the federal government was creating the bats. They said, you know what? Let's give them a pathway to operate legally. And guess what? We're gonna have a stream of taxes on those billions of dollars that are being spent no matter what. And this is the problem is like now that this thing is like legal, what we see is like many soccer players or Brazilian actors kind of I don't know if recommending, maybe they're not recommending, but they are advertising the bats, and this ends up conveying a message that bats are unacceptable thing in Brazil, and this is basically just getting out of control. And here, this is the headline you see over here. Like it's just like the casino take, right? Like the house always wins, right? And I don't know how, some people, they would still believe they could make money or be better off by betting money on something. I don't know how someone could think that way, but they are also giving like an example here, like an entrepreneur or a business owner lost 3 million reais with bets, and he was even being monitored by his wife. Like his wife was like checking his cell phone, and he would hide like in the bathroom, or he would leave the house, to bet a little bit more, right? So clearly you can say this is like a kind of, a mental issue, right? Like a mental illness that is being like aggravated by the whole bad situation. But listen, this thing is really, really serious, right? Like, I mean, this thing, and I could tell, even before it got to this point, just because, particularly when you talk to like the more challenged financial sectors in Brazil, I mean, like they think about that as something that could, make it then better off. Very unfortunate for sure. Well, this said, let's take a look at Remax, our partner for real estate agency in Brazil. If you need a short list of properties, if you need someone who speak your language and understands foreign citizens, this is gonna be Remax Nomad States. There you have their contact information. They have a WhatsApp channel. They have the email address you can use as a start point for your search. All right, let's see who else we have over here in our live stream. We have Aaron. With respect to União Estável is having 2 girlfriends living with you in the same house, a defense, publicly not presenting as a traditional marriage family, or a setup for double the damages? That's an interesting question, Aaron. Very creative, to say the least. And listen, I think you guys can tell by my takes, by my explanations. I'm typically more conservative on the assessment of risk, and nowadays, Aaron, there is a somewhat trend in Brazil of let's say unusual families, right? And one of those unusual combinations for families is going to be families with, like either two men or two women. And my take on it is that even though you could have like two women living with you, this would not preclude a judge of finding a união estável, right? Which is pretty crazy by any standards. But I don't know, just by articulating the concepts in my head, I don't think it is too far-fetched, to find a judge who would say, you know what, yes, now you have, two uniões estáveis instead of a single one. All right, Aaron. So yes, particularly if you are the foreign citizen man, right, and then there are two Brazilian women, I guess the judge would say, you know what, like this was a foreign citizen basically taking advantage of two Brazilian women, and guess what? I'm gonna find for the união estável. All right, Aaron. But I understand is a question like a hypothetical, and it's an interesting question indeed. And letting you guys know, if you are on Instagram, if you are on YouTube, you can chat with us. You can enter your comments, you can enter your questions, and we're going to be happy to discuss your points live. All right, let's see what else we have here. Let's take a look at our backlog. All right, backlog of questions about the visit at the Brazilian immigration in Brazil. How does that work? Do we need representation by a lawyer? There are different ways for you to apply for an immigration benefit. There are different ways for you to interact with the Brazilian immigration. One very common face of the Brazilian immigration is going to be the Brazilian Federal Police. And there are specific stations in charge of assisting foreign citizens. So it's not like you can go to any to federal police station. There are specific ones. So in the city of São Paulo, there is a specific station that is going to be in the neighborhood of Lapa. Okay, in Rio de Janeiro, for instance, is going to be within the Santos Dumont Airport. All right, Santos Dumont Airport. So that's a specific Brazilian Federal Police station in charge of assisting foreign citizens. So that's where you typically go for some procedures, such as applying for your RNM card. The RNM card is like the immigration a residency card for foreign citizens. And no, you cannot just go there and ask for one. You actually need to be following a track to get to the card. The card is going to be at the end of the process. So for instance, for the digital nomad, if you are visiting Brazil, you may decide, well, I want to stay longer. You would apply for the digital nomad residency because you are already in Brazil, so you're not asking for a visa. You would apply through an online system known as Migrante Web. And after this application is approved, that's when you're going to visit the Brazilian Federal Police. And many people, they would mix this up and show up at the Brazilian Federal Police and say, well, I need a digital nomad. They say, well, this is not the place for you to apply for, right? So, and this is somewhat confusing to foreign citizens because some of the tracks are actually going to be applied directly at the Brazilian Federal Police. So some of them, no, you don't go to the Federal Police at the beginning. And for others, such as the Brazil marriage residency application, which technically is called Autorização de Residência para Reunificação Familiar, or, Family Reunification Residency Authorization. This one is done typically directly at the Brazilian Federal Police. So some of them are, others are not. And to make things even more challenging, the requirements for each track, they are going to differ. Just another example. If you are applying for the Brazil Digital Nomad Residency, typically a background check, let's say if you are from the US, a background check from the county or state level would suffice. But if you are applying for the marriage version, for the marriage track, then they are going to require for sure the FBI background check. So depending on the track, different ways to apply, different requirements for you to present. Okay, that's the nature of the Brazilian Federal Police. We have two resources that may be helpful. One resource is a page. We have a page. So if you just come to our website and search for Brazilian Federal Police, you're gonna see the page over there. The second resource is gonna be a YouTube video in which we recorded in São Paulo, and it's basically talking about the Brazilian Federal Police in São Paulo. But I think many of the concepts we articulate in that video, they could be extended to other locations in Brazil. All right, let's see what else we have. We have another message from Aaron. I may need to leave Brazil. Can your firm help with selling my property and repatriating my funds to Canada? They were not sent here properly with wire transfer. Yes, Aaron, yes, that's something we can help. I'm just curious, Aaron, like, would you mind sharing where do you have your property? Because that may be important, like for representation. But yes, like we typically assist foreign citizens with selling properties, you know, and repatriating funds. If it was not sent by a bank wire transfer, there may be additional work required to help you move the funds, you know, back to your country. But yes, that's something we can potentially help. And if that's your plan, my recommendation, Aaron, for as a next step, is for you to schedule a consultation, and then we can go over the details and get a plan for you. All right, Aaron. We have a General Principal. Boa tarde, General Principal. Boa tarde, Senhor Oliveira. Hope everything is well. I heard that if you wire funds to Brazil, but your name on the source bank does not exactly match the bank in Brazil, then it may be seen as income. General Principal. So, you know, it's difficult to comment on a specific scenario. But I can articulate some of the factors that would be taken into consideration when looking at a remittance that was sent to Brazil. So every time there is a large transfer of funds to Brazil, this transfer will never enter Brazil without an associated CPF number. And the CPF number, as you probably know, is the tax ID we have in Brazil. So whenever money enters the country, there's going to be a message to the Brazilian Revenue Service saying, listen, John Smith just received like 200,000 US dollars. And how the Brazilian Revenue Service is going to, you know, act on this piece of information, it's something we cannot foresee, right? We cannot forecast ahead of time. Now, in terms of name matching, if names are different, most probably the Brazilian bank would not allow the funds to be released. Okay, so my concern here, it wouldn't be necessarily if the Brazilian Revenue Service is going to see this as income or not. It's going to be more about the Brazilian bank authorizing this money to be released. Okay, so that would be the main concern. Now, in terms of the money being classified as income, giving you a kind of overview about how this could happen. Let's say if you have a Brazilian spouse, and then you are in the US, you send this money to the Brazilian spouse, and the Brazilian spouse never did the saída definitiva, which is the tax exit filing. So for the Brazilian Revenue Service, your spouse is in Brazil still, and now you send it 200,000 US dollars. Guess what? The Brazilian Revenue Service is going to say, well, this person is receiving $200,000. It looks like income to me. Okay, and then the Brazilian Revenue Service could audit your spouse because of the $200,000, and then it would be your problem to explain to the Brazilian Revenue Service that the 200,000 US dollars was not income. It was basically money that you guys saved over time. Now again, if you never filed for the saída definitiva, your spouse never filed, then there is an inconsistency in terms of how the Brazilian Revenue Service sees your spouse. And how this is going to play out naturally is going to depend on many specifics. Okay, but in general, just because money is entering Brazil, it doesn't mean it is income, right? Particularly if this money was earned over time. Okay, now specifically to Brazilians or foreign citizens residing in the United States, there may be a question of whether this money that you earned in the past has paid taxes to Brazil, if taxes should have been paid to Brazil. All right, general principle. I hope that helps a bit with the understanding. Aaron in Hortolândia, São Paulo, outside Campinas, purchased na planta. Na planta, for those of you who don't know this term, na planta means off plan, right? Is when you buy, there is a plan to, raise a building of apartments, but there are no apartments, so you buy at the inception of the plan, off plan, right? Off plan property. So that's what Aaron is talking over here. Purchased na planta and only 78% built. I have half of the funds for the contract in Nubank. Half of the contract price is already paid to the builder. Yes, Aaron, particularly if the building is, proceeding well, like the construction is going well, you may be able to find buyers, like even before the apartment is ready. Of course, ideally from a resale perspective, once the apartment is ready, is available for someone to move in, that's when you can typically sell for like more of like a full price. If you sell before it's ready, typically you need to sell with a substantial discount on top of or on the price that would be the natural price after the apartment was ready. All right, but that's something feasible for sure, right? It may require a consent from the builder, right? Builders typically in the paperwork they say like you cannot sell your rights unless they consent to it. Many times they may charge you. They say, well, I'm gonna need to vet the new folk, and therefore I'm gonna charge you, like this fee. I don't know. It could be $2,000. It could be $5,000. But they typically charge you a fee and then let you assign your rights to a prospective buyer. Okay, Aaron. Yes, that's it. I see here many people joining us like through Instagram, but people on Instagram are typically quiet. And my take is that most people would access Instagram through a phone, and is not as comfortable, to type stuff on a phone as it is on YouTube. But yes, if you are on Instagram, you can also, type, ask questions, and participate with us live. We are live here on Instagram. We're live on YouTube. We are also live on TikTok and Facebook as well. But we don't see the messages that are being posted over there. That's something we've been working on. Another challenge we have is that currently we are unable to schedule the streams, and that may be complicating things for some of our typical friends who would actually schedule their participation ahead of time, and now we are just like showing up at the scheduled time. But yes, we are working to fix that. Okay, let's take a look at another topic from our backlog. All right, so this is more like a fact pattern. This person is considering buying a property in Santa Teresa, Rio de Janeiro. Property is still entangled in a probate, and it may have some issues on the construction recording on the deed. All right, so yes, so Santa Teresa is a neighborhood in the city of Rio de Janeiro. It is like a historical neighborhood, like a neighborhood that has been developed for centuries, and is like an uphill neighborhood, really, really nice a neighborhood in my opinion. And like the probate entanglement is very common, and our typical advisory is for you not to buy during the entanglement, right? Like during the ongoing probate. Because what we see happening is that, like heirs, they cannot help. Like they want to get their, share of the money, of the inheritance SAP. But, probates in Brazil may take a long time. And therefore, many times the heirs are going to organize themselves and try to, have this property sold ahead of time. And, like a potential upside, if you buy something like this, typically you're going to want to have like a large discount on the price. And the downside is that typically you're not going to get the title, right? Like you're going to get basically a purchase agreement with the sellers. You may take possession of the property, but usually they are going to receive the full price ahead of time. And then down the line, you're going to need their collaboration to have like the final title issued. And good luck with getting help from those sellers after they have your full payment in their pockets. And that's the reason why some people who, buy in this way, they're going to actually need to file a lawsuit down the line, a type of adverse possession, right? That's how it's understood in the United States, adverse possession. In Brazil, we say uso capião, and you need to file an action for uso capião in order for you to get like a clean legal title on this property, because guess what? Now you paid those folks. There are 4 or 5 families. When you're gonna, when eventually the probate is over, guess what? Some of them have, died as well. It's always extremely messy. So you either buy it, understanding that you're gonna spend like a boatload of money down the line with, legal services, and you're gonna be chasing like, your name on the chain of ownership. Or you be patient and you monitor this thing, and if it resolves during a certain timeline, that's when you actually move ahead and buy it. Okay, another solution we see for some clients is like when they make a deposit, like they make a good faith payment to kind of have like a preference in terms of buying this property. and when the probate is resolved, they would basically just proceed with the remaining of the payment and be able to secure title. But yes, Santa Teresa and actually most of Rio de Janeiro, we do see this reality a lot, like people trying to sell something they should not be selling. Okay, very, very common, and we see the situation across the board. All right, let's see what else we have. Anything live? No, not yet. All right, taking a look at Instagram, we don't have any participations. And again, if you are on Instagram, don't be shy. Just type something over here and have a conversation with us. Talking about properties, we spoke about União Estável, and I'm gonna be commenting. All right, commenting about this one. This is a somewhat repetitive scenario. It's a sad scenario, but we see, every now and then here at the firm is going to be people, right? Like particularly from the United States, with criminal records, and they could have trouble in terms of coming to Brazil. Okay, particularly if we're talking about crimes of a sexual nature or crimes against minors. Very typical for the Brazilian immigration to basically just deny you any type of visa at all, and even entry in Brazil. Okay, and for those who are married to a Brazilian, there is a possibility of filing a lawsuit against the Brazilian government, and under typically two legal thesis. Okay, one thesis is the right of raising a family. So like in this scenario, imagine like the couple is living in the U.S. and then the couple wants to come to Brazil, and the Brazilian, of course, could come to Brazil at any time, but not the U.S. citizen because of the criminal history. So here the claim is that the Brazilian partner has a right to raise a family. So there is more scrutiny on the decision of the Brazilian government to deny a visa to that folk. Okay, of course, this should be something that happened, a long time ago. If it is something that just happened, for sure, even a lawsuit is not going to compel a judge to, it would not justify to a Brazilian judge to compel the Brazilian government to grant the visa. Now, let's say if that happened 15 or 20 years ago, you would have a best shot. You would have a good shot. And another legal thesis or legal theory we typically would use in such a case is that in Brazil, there is no lifetime punishment. Okay, there is no lifetime imprisonment, and there shouldn't be a lifetime ban as well. So again, if whatever crimes happened 20 years ago, even if extremely serious, truth a lawsuit against the Brazilian government, a foreign citizen could have a stand in terms of saying, listen, you are punishing me for something that happened 20 years ago. That's the equivalent to a lifetime sentence, and therefore is unconstitutional. And what a judge would have to do over here is to balance out the needs of this foreign citizen and the Brazilian partner against the interests of Brazil as a country to keep people away, people with serious criminal records. All right, but the constitutional challenge through a lawsuit would be a possibility. All right, let's see what else. Aaron, if the PCC CV are terrorist organizations and on the OFAC list, do you think there is a way to profit from using PICs and Brazilian judgments to do forensic auditing to find bad funds moved to the U.S. All right. So yeah, let me see if I follow Aaron. Like I understand the situation, right? And for those of you who don't know, like PCC and CV are two criminal organizations established in Brazil, and they were added to the OFAC list, which is a list from the United States of terrorist related organizations. And therefore, now the United States has like the tool set to basically, block funds and accounts of, anyone who's linked to those criminal organizations. And here, Aaron's question is if there is a way to profit from using PICs and Brazilian judgments to do forensic auditing to find bad funds that were moved to the U.S. I'm going to be honest, this extrapolates my knowledge of this field, right? Like in terms of, how to, profit, from, identifying funds or, let's say, working in this space. Okay, that's something we typically don't do. It's not like a field of law. So this one is one that I'm not going to be able to answer, but it's an interesting sharing, right? And for those of you who don't know, again, two Brazilian criminal organizations that were added to the OFAC, and as you may imagine, a lot of political grievance regarding the U.S. adding criminal organizations. Very interesting, and there was like one that got a lot of criticism to President Lula, right, the Brazilian president. He was, really, really upset, saying that those criminal organizations were like a Brazilian problem and not a U.S. problem. Okay, but the reality is like they've been grown nonstop, and very difficult to say by any measurements that the Brazilian government has been doing a good job at I don't know, thwarting or eliminating or disbanding those criminal rings. Like it's not something that has been done, particularly President Lula's government. Okay, so when President Lula does something good, does something that advances the Brazilian agenda, we give kudos to President Lula. But in terms of defeating or like resisting organized crime in Brazil, it hasn't been a good government, unfortunately. All right, let's see what else we have. Taking a look here at Instagram, it doesn't look like we have anything going on. I do see many people joining us and even following us, but no text and no participation yet. And if that's the case, let's take a look. Let's take a look at our backlog. All right, this one is a heavy one, right? Like, how do you feel about Brazil, losing to Norway, right? Like, I mean, we're talking, of course, about the FIFA World Cup, and Brazil lost to Norway, and I think it was 2 goals for Norway, or I think it was even 3 goals. I'm not sure, 2 or 3 for Norway, and 1 goal from Brazil. Brazil was not playing well. And I guess that's how it works, right? Like if you don't play well, you go back home. Okay, so it wasn't Brazil's best cup for sure, but Brazil remains, as most of you or many of you probably know, Brazil remains the country with the highest number of World Cups won, right? So We won for 5 times, and as far as I know or remember, there is no other team with 5 victories. Okay, so yes, it was a very poor performance for Brazil. We were sent back home, but I would say still Brazil has the best record ever in World Cups. Okay, we have a Belinda. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Belinda. I divorced from a marriage performed in Brazil in a U.S. court. 3 months later, I married an American. I never legalized the divorce or second marriage at the Brazilian consulate. Continued. Years later, my divorce in Brazil was finalized from the same husband. Only now, after 25 years in the U.S., have I decided to move to Brazil. Yeah, Belinda, I see you're gonna, continue to type, but I can, probably tell what's your challenge. You're not gonna be able to secure residency for your spouse unless you take care of all of that past. And while you type the final piece of your question, I can tell you about this kind of duty, right? It's like a legal obligation that Brazilians, no matter if they are living abroad, and it does not matter for how long, they need to keep their records in Brazil up to date. Okay, so there is no workaround, but let's take a look. Years later, my divorce in Brazil was finalized from the same husband. Only now, after 25 years in the U.S., I am an American citizen. Have I decided to move to Brazil? How can I legalize my current marriage in Brazil so that my current husband can change his visa from tourist to family? Yes, Belinda, that's exactly what I told you. Like, you cannot skip, like, you don't skip stuff. There is a principle, it's a very strong legal principle in the Brazilian legal system. It is the principle of continuity. So you cannot register a current marriage until you take care of all of the old stuff. Okay, so the way it works is that you're gonna register the first marriage, and then you need to homologate the divorce. Okay, and only after you did that for the first marriage, that's when you can, handle the registration of your second marriage. Okay, and this is a somewhat common situation here at the firm. So, on one side, yes, it's an obligation that you should have taken care in the past. On the other side, I understand, like, if you're living, in the United States, you are, just busy with your life in the U.S. So this is something that we see very often here at the firm. And what we typically do, we are typically gonna buy our client time through some type of temporary track. So one temporary track, it could be like the digital nomad. There is another track which is the retirement, meaning that your goal should be allow your husband to remain in Brazil, and in the meantime you would troubleshoot all of those registration steps that we spoke about. And by the way, we handle them on a daily basis here at the firm. All right, Belinda. So if you want to send, like, just send, like, this fact pattern by email to our onboarding. Okay, I'm gonna write down over here. Right, you can basically just send, like, this email. But if you wanna know, like, directly from us how this works, timelines, strategies, how things are done in reality, you may wanna schedule a consultation here with us. The consultation, it's done over Zoom, okay? And I'm gonna share here the link for you to schedule the consultation if you wish to do so. And that would help you get a solid plan for your husband. But again, this is something somewhat common in Brazil. Matt Gaines, wow, Matt, it's such a good surprise. It's such a pleasure to have Matt and Adrian. Oi, Dr. Oliveira. Do you see a big difference between the U.S. consulates and what each asks for as far as documentation for the retirement visa? Matt, a couple of takes on that. They are somewhat similar in terms of what they ask, okay? But unfortunately, they are not similar in the way that they are going to evaluate what you're providing, okay? So yes, there could be variations. And here comes like the second piece of my answer. Like you cannot shop around, right? Typically, you have an address. This is the address you have on your driver license, and this address is going to lock in. The consulate in charge of your applications. Okay, but I can give you a couple of examples in terms of discretion or a difference or big differences, right, among consulates. Most consulates, they are not going to accept retirement income that is not traditional. So let's say you have a $1 million stock portfolio and you're getting dividends consistently above $2,000. So the $2,000 would meet the threshold for the Brazil retirement visa, right? However, dividends is not a traditional source of retirement. Brazil is typically expecting something like either Social Security or pension or disability. And therefore, if you present to a consulate, your, I don't know, $3,000 dividends you're getting on a monthly basis because of your stock portfolio, that would be a gamble. And very interestingly, this is going to also depend on the consulate officer who's going to be reviewing your application. There is a very good chance that this person who's going to be reviewing your application has no clue about what I just said. And if that's the case, they see the $3,000, thumbs up. Now, if you have a more experienced consulate officer and they know the distinctions, this officer would give you a thumbs down because, again, this is not qualifying a retirement income, at least from a traditional Brazilian perspective. Right? So you see, like, it could be the same consulate, two distinct officers, two different decisions. And this would happen even within the same consulate. And there is also the possibility that different consulates are going to apply different requirements. So the idea here is like, your address, and your address is going to lock in the specific consulate, and then you take a look at the consulate and they are going to say, the documents that they are going to need. But again, unfortunately, there is discretion in terms of what is going to be accepted or not. All right. And Matt, remember, if you are facing an issue with consulates, this process is much more standardized when you file physically in Brazil. Okay, so if you file physically in Brazil, we typically have a better control over how the requirements are enforced. And I say better control, I never say 100% because even in Brazil there is discretion in terms of immigration. But because of the number of applications we handle on a monthly basis for the retirement track in Brazil, we are always kind of up to date in terms of how these requirements are enforced. All right, so if you're having like headaches at the consulate level, something you may want to consider is like to apply in Brazil. And listen, for the Brazil retirement journey, my recommendation is that you typically plan for multiple trips. And guess what? If you are planning to come and live in Brazil, I don't think you should skip on as many trips as necessary, right? And nowadays, to travel from the U.S. to Brazil, is not such a big deal. Okay, trust me. We have clients who are, believe it or not, they travel in and out every single month to Brazil. So if you have a journey related, right, to the retirement track, and if you're facing like a wall with the Brazilian consulate, another thing for you to consider is to apply in Brazil instead, and to basically just come to Brazil, because we cannot apply in Brazil unless you're physically here. You come to Brazil, you're here, we can apply. You go back to the US. After this residency is approved, then you need to come over like for an application at the Polícia Federal. Again, you could come basically for a day or two. And then after you secure this residency, then you can plan your moving, like your real moving from the United States to Brazil in a more peaceful manner, okay? There may be a challenge going on there. I don't know if it's your case, but I'm just showing that this is many times a challenge. It's when you try to adjust every single time and event in a timeline. Like we typically try to help you with that, but there is so much that can be done in terms of planning. So when you change the mindset, if you will, I think things start to become more doable. All right, Matt, but good to see you over here. I was missing you guys. All right, Bruce, we had a consultation with you almost 2 years ago. All right, Bruce, we would like your guidance recommendations on our remaining next steps. You set up a consultation soon. Good to see you over here, Bruce. And let me know how things are going with you. Are you currently in Brazil, or you're not in Brazil? Let us know how things are going, and very good to see you over here, Bruce. All right, Belinda, we'll do that, but the important is to know that has a way, right? Of course there is, Belinda. There is always a way, okay? So don't worry, there is a way, and if you are asking me this question, I can, if you allow me, I can read that you are anxious about the process. And, as I like to say in my consultations, in our live streams, Brazil has many upsides, but unfortunately, a major downside is like the bureaucracy and red tape. And I don't think I need to tell you that, because you are Brazilian, right? So you know about those things. But listen, that's why we are here, so we can take, if not all, we can take most of this weight on your shoulders, okay? And keep this thing moving, handle the paperwork, and then you can go live your life and have your husband in Brazil enjoying the many upsides that Brazil has. All right, Belinda? Ok, James Rochas, boa tarde, amigo. Boa tarde, James. I went to the Polícia Federal for União Estável after the cartório processing. The police told me now everything is online, Sismigra. Seems like they changed the process. James, the Sismigra is not like, there are two systems, right? Like there is the Migrante Web, that's the one you would use for digital nomad, retirement, property investment. The Sismigra is just a way for you to kind of present your information ahead of time, okay? So, and this is not standard on every Polícia Federal, right? So it doesn't mean it has changed. It just means that for this specific Polícia Federal that you went, that's how the process works. And I would assume that they basically told you, yes, you just need to, upload your documents over there. Once you do that, you're going to schedule an appointment with us. Right, James? And if I'm not mistaken, like you said, you were applying in Salvador, Bahia, if I'm not mistaken, right? But that's good to know, okay? Very good to know that they are enforcing the Sismigra. And the Sismigra, I can tell you, is basically just like imagine like a template system in which you're gonna file and upload everything. So unless you uploaded everything, you're not gonna be able to get the appointment. All right, James. I hope that they make sense. And listen, I understand many people, try and do the thing by themselves. But that's how it works, right? It's a learning process, right? Like you are becoming an expert in Brazilian immigration, right? And if you do have the time to do so, it's doable, it's feasible. Again, many people do it, and many other people, they don't want to learn and like spend their time going multiple times to Police Federal, and that's when they hire us, right? Just remember. But if you have time, if you are open to those going back and forth, then it's something you may try. Heads up, I don't recall, James, if you are from the U.S. or not. Like the background check, like for U.S. citizens, is a very big thing, because if you miss the time window, you need to get a fresh one, which is a super pain in the neck. So just keep in mind that some of the documents, they have a specific timeline, right? So I'm talking about this journey of learning how to do things. Just make sure you're not gonna have your documents outside of the freshness window. Belinda, yes, Belinda, thank you for your support. Very happy whenever we can, bring some comfort to you guys. Okay, let's see what else we have. All right, so nothing on Instagram, nothing here on the chat window. Let me see if we have anything interesting in our backlog. All right. Yeah, I mean, this is like a whole fact pattern. I'm not gonna read this whole thing, but this is something we have a couple of cases as we speak. Like when people hire, right? Like I mean, whenever people hire cheap legal services in Brazil, I think it's not. Many times it's not intentional, right? Like many times it's just because, let's say, if you're coming from the U.S. Many things, they look cheap in Brazil, and then for some reason you kind of associate that pattern to the legal services, right? And then you go and you hire typically a friend of a friend. Okay, like you have a friend in Brazil, and guess what, that friend is gonna have like friend attorneys, and then you're gonna go and hire someone who has no clue about the needs of foreign citizens. And not surprisingly, many times, I don't know if most of the time, but many times, as far as I can tell from the many cases we have here at the firm, this is going to end up in disaster. And we have a case over here, like it went through our real estate unit, like for assessment, and now it's going to our litigation unit. And like I'm not gonna, of course, mention enough details to identify the client, but it looks like it was an immigration client from our firm. So this person used our firm, to get all the immigration things done. They got everything they needed, and guess what? They hired someone else for the real estate transaction, and it's messy. Okay, again, I'm not going to share identifiable details, but now they are going to need to resort to litigation, and they are going to spend more time on our litigation services than they would have spent on the initial services they would have hired from us. I don't know. I never got to ask this client, listen, why didn't you hire us? And the last piece of thing I'm gonna tell over here, like, believe or not, our client hired an attorney who was a friend of the seller, right? I said, no, that's too much. That's too much for my head, right? Like, you're gonna hire the friend of the seller as your attorney. I mean, not sure what I could tell about it, but that's more or less a heads up against this mindset of skipping or saving uh, on legal legal fees. Like, of course, when you can afford legal fees, right? Like, I understand sometimes it's not a matter of being cheap, of not wanting to pay for good service. It's more a matter of reality, of necessity. But one thing I guarantee, good services in Brazil, they are never cheap. Okay, so that would be my message over here. We have Matt. Thank you so much. Matt is reminding us, like, if you're here with us, if you like the content, make sure to like our live stream. This is going to help our business. Kind of compensation for, like the information we share. And this is going to be helpful for other people just like you to find our content. So I want to say thank you to all of you for the interesting participations. And I hope to see you again next Wednesday. Wishing you all